the hill. Time to sled down the hill.
I've got,
Faster now,
I've had my
faster
teeth
now.
out. It
This
really
way,
hurts.
rolling,
Just
rolling.
hum at a high level.
Down the hill, rolling down the hill, rolling down the hill. Faster, faster. Spinning 100 miles an hour. I could launch off the top of the hill into the sky. Become a spaceman, a robot boy.
Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football podcast. I'm Joe Devine, and today I'm delighted to be joined by JJ Bull,
Good day.
John McKenzie,
Good afternoon.
and Kaya Kainak.
Watcha.
Also, Steve's here.
Hello!
That's right, that's Steve Hankey. Now, what was on the docket today? So many things. Actually, not so many things, just one thing. We talked about one thing the whole time because it's a really, really interesting thing, and we also had to run short. Now, what's the thing we talked about? That's right, everyone. It's Tottenham Hotspur, or Spurs. Never Tottenham. Never Tottenham.
We do call them Tottenham quite a few times during the show.
Littered throughout the show, because obviously you can call them Tottenham, it's completely fine. Obviously, Tottenham have parted ways with Ange Postecoglou. That happened over the weekend? I think it did, didn't it? And so we question, is that fine? I mean, is that the right thing or the wrong thing? We talk about that for quite a long time. And I'm not really sure where we landed. Well, I know where I land, but I can't remember where we landed as a group. Okay. How many sheets to a wind is incredibly inebriated, right, Steve? And what are sheets? Did we talk about that?
No, unfortunately we didn't, even though I did a lot of research to find out. And it was ignored.
All right, tell us quickly, Steve.
Sheets is a
what are
sailing
sheets?
thing. So sheets to the wind were ropes, not sails. The ropes that controlled the sails on sailing ships. So if your ropes were not tied down, then your sails would flap all over the place and the ship would move like a drunken sailor.
Right.
So 3 sheets to the wind is bad because they're all loose and flapping everywhere.
4 sheets.
He said 4.
Even worse.
It would be even worse.
Even more.
We'd be upside down, capsized. You know, I found out something the other day. I finally decided to look up, because we work in a place of journalism, and I kept thinking, every time I heard it, I was like, I should really know the history of this. When people say bury the lead, I know that is spelled L-E-D-E. You aware of this?
I've never heard this one before.
So the phrase to bury the lead is to sort of bury the most interesting part of the story deeper in the story. So the example often given when you Google it is like, there's a story about the weather or something, and you spend ages talking about the weather, and then at the end you say someone died because they got struck by lightning. You know, like that's the most interesting part about it, but they buried it at the bottom. They bury the lead. Now, I knew that was what that meant, but I never knew why they spelt it L-E-D-E. Does anyone know?
No.
Isn't the lead just like the first line of the story?
Yeah, but do you know why it's spelt differently to L-E-A-D?
No.
So I thought it must be originate from a different word and might just mean similar things. You would be forgiven for misspelling that as bury the lead L-E-A-D because it leads the story. Yeah. The only reason it's spelt differently is because in the era of the printing press, they wanted to distinguish it, as a saying that journalists were using a lot, from the metal lead that was used on the printing press. So it is exactly the same word.
The lead is it's literally the italicized bit at the top, right?
Yeah. But so it in theory is spelled L-E-A-D because it leads the piece. They just changed the word because
it looks like lead.
And then even though we don't use printing presses in the same way anymore,
because they were like saying, we're going to bury the lead.
Yeah, and then people kept going
they kept just burying
outside.
all of the letters, and they were like, where's all the letters?
And you can't blame factory people, because if you tell them to bury lead, they will do it.
Yeah.
That's what that's.
Did
that's
you
how
see
it
that
works.
thing I shared? Do you know what a geoduck is?
Oh no!
Isn't it?
It's
isn't
mad.
I
it
thought you'd
Pokemon?
misspelt Geodude.
No.
It's a Pokemon, isn't it?
It's well, this is I think that's why it's named that. It's
What's
this
the
thing
geo?
you get. I think apparently mostly in Asia, wherever you get what's the marshlands, that sort of bits. I saw this video of some lassie inside a hole that they dig. I don't know how they get them. And then she goes in and she pulls out this thing from the ground. It's like a clam, but of the land. It's some weird thing.
A land clam.
Yeah, apparently it's like a delicacy in certain parts of Asia.
Is it real?
Yeah, it's weird. I'd never heard of it. It feels like
It's a bivalve.
It feels like a Mandela effect or like a timeline thing where
Really?
I don't understand. I've never heard of that before.
Is it really?
It must be where Geodude comes from.
Steve says a geoduck is a very large edible bivalve clam found on the Pacific coast of North America. It's known for its large size and the long siphonic neck that extends from the shell, which is why it's often referred to as a giant or the world's largest clam.
Looks pretty phallic.
It's weird.
Anyway, we talked about Ange Postecoglou in today's episode. We also played the separation game, and then we refer to the fact that Thomas Frank may or may not be the next Tottenham manager. We don't know yet. But all we know is that David Ornstein described him as the leading contender. We take what David says very seriously here, so we discuss that in the second half of the show. And then we've got to go. Well, where else to begin than with this sweet little petite right here? It says, points are bad. They're very, very bad. It's my tiny trophy. It's my Victor's trophy.
Yeah, it's not. No, it needs to be bigger.
What are you talking about?
It needs to be a proper trophy with like a picture of a football man on it.
It's going to get bigger every year. And also, I did look at football options, but they were too expensive for the scale of the joke.
Then would not have been funny if you spent £30 on a trophy. That's quite funny.
This cost me actually surprisingly little money. This cost me £7, and to get with an inscription on it as well. I did come very close, and this is going to sound gratuitous. I came very close to spending £140, but then I didn't. And instead I thought, this says, well done, like a little motivational message to me. Well done for being so good at points bet. So I'm going to keep this next to me at my desk at work. And the fun thing is, although this might be a small looking trophy, that's a mug's trophy that's only cost £7, if you, JJ, or you, John, or not you, Kai, because you're not here regularly enough, but the imaginary person who sits in your seat were to win this off me next year, I will have to give you my possession. I think that it sort of stows it with quite a lot of sentimental, important metaphorical value. So have a good look at this on the windowsill next to my desk over the next year. And if you want to take this from me, you got to play tough. You got to come ready to rumble in points are bad. Okay?
Are you going to have a boss parade?
Yes, I've already had one. You weren't invited. It was just me.
On a bus.
On my own.
That's just a journey, isn't it? It's not
well, yeah, there were other people on the bus who'd pay to be on there. But I was celebrating. I just also happened to get home from work, you know? Anyway, I'll pop that just there in a place
it's nice
no one can see.
Bot can enjoy his victory in this manner.
Yeah, the 1-1 bot will earn the trophy next season. Anyway, where else to begin, obviously, apart from where we've already started, than with something else not funny. Ange Postecoglou, who has been fired from his job. Now, we always caveat this, don't we? We always caveat it by saying, isn't it sad when someone loses their employment? We don't like that. We want people, the working man, to stay employed.
That's true.
In their jobs. And I'm sure Ange Postecoglou will get another job. And in terms of he was very well paid, so in terms of his economic security, I think he'll be okay. Not a nice thing, though, when it happens to anyone, particularly such a high-profile chap as Ange Postecoglou.
That's right. Yeah. And after all he did for them as well.
Well, indeed. I mean, they won a trophy, didn't they? And that's the sort of heart of the matter. That's where we're going to start. We will go on a bit later to talk about Thomas Frank and some of the other, at this point, seemingly not really that many other possible contenders for people who might take the Spurs job going forwards. But there's been some real... it's been a lot more controversial than I expected. Let's put it that way. Big Ange Postecoglou being fired. Let's go around the horn quickly and just see who thinks it makes sense. I'm happy to start and say I'm surprised there's even a conversation about this. I mean, they finished 17th. I know they won a trophy, but they also finished 17th. And we've seen many of the same people, the same sorts of fans, criticised teams like Manchester United for holding on to Erik ten Hag because they won a trophy. Or there's lots of examples of the reverse where teams then retrospectively get called stupid for doing this exact thing. Or sorry, doing the opposite of what this exact thing is. So personally, I don't really think it's that contentious an issue at all. I think if you finish 17th with Spurs after 2 years in the job, you're going to lose your job, and you were lucky to even be there by the end of the season, you know? But JJ, what do you think?
I swing between thinking it's because he did well and he was nice, and he made Spurs fans enjoy their team a bit.
He did well in the Europa League.
Well, there's all.
He didn't do well anywhere else.
No, that's true. He didn't do very well everywhere else.
Yeah.
And so I guess if you're looking at pure performance, then yes.
I think that's what they were looking at, isn't it? Because I don't think the Spurs people who decided whether he should stay or not were thinking, is everyone happy? Were they happy? I think they were thinking, is this economically sustainable or a good idea to continue?
I know, but there is a world in which the sort of characters that he looks for and we're trying to bring in would work. I wonder whether at that absolute elite level of Premier League where tiny, tiny margins make all the difference, whether it does. I mean, you'll look at Man United now as an example of a team who just needs to get different characters in, let alone just better players. And the characters will help establish the attitude and the environment which you can then grow from. And I think Ange Postecoglou, it feels like the kind of manager who could excel in any sport, but he's chosen football. He's like one of these guys who talks about the psychology of it and build the dressing room and, they
you
foster
could imagine
these
him as a
mentalities.
great hurling coach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think he'd hurl things far.
Yeah, I think so too.
I bet he could.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we're based on what he did in Japan and with Australia and at Celtic, which he did very well. It's finishing that low down with Spurs. This is the thing that it's obvious that you want to do better than that. Everyone would have done. The injuries are relevant, but they did do lots of things that were weird.
Yeah.
And it was 2 years of it. So
Yeah. Well, we'll come back. John, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm the last person in the world to want to sort of defend club ownerships on things, but you have to view these decisions through the eyes of the club ownership, right? They're the ones who make this decision. And I think on that basis, you're always going to end up with two very different sets of opinions. What the fans obviously have a lot of affection for Postecoglou. He brought them a trophy, gave them some nice experiences. The club ownership, especially in the situation of Spurs, their main concern is that they get a manager who performs well in the league.
Yeah.
Because for them, the opportunity to actually develop a team that is in some way sustainable.
Well, the sustainable opportunity to develop a sustainable team as well, right?
Yes, right. Is to finish well in the league. And in many respects, and it's not a very glorious thing to say, but in many respects, winning trophies doesn't actually, especially the Europa League, like the Europa League does not give Spurs a huge windfall economically.
Well, I mean, in some ways it does because it allows them access to the Champions League, which brings with it quite a lot of money. But I mean, your point is it doesn't give them that windfall on a sustainable basis year after year.
Yeah, the point being that like winning the Europa League, I think is 50 million-ish, that sort of ballpark figure. Whereas getting knocked out in the knockout stages of the Champions League is sort of 80 million. So simply getting into the Champions League is a guarantee of around 80 million, whereas you have to win the Europa League to get 50 million, which is obviously the sustainability of those two things is stark.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why the decision has been made the way that it's been made, because the owners of Spurs, whoever they may be, who making the decision, because it seems unclear.
I am the Lord of the gods, said he. And
it took every ounce of strength not for me to do that also.
Forever it may be, and I thank you, Lord of the dogs, said it. Lord of the dance, not Lord of the dogs. Although Lord of the dogs would be funny. Woof, woof. You know, that sort of thing. That would be good, wouldn't it? Yeah. Should we sing it again? Hi, hey, wherever he may be.
We are the famous
dogs
of the sea. We live in the sea. We can breathe under the sea. Dogs of war.
Kyle, what do you think about Ange Postecoglou being sacked by Tottenham?
Hang on a second.
Can I finish my
John
my
hasn't
point?
finished.
So essentially I think
Dance. No,
I think the decision has been made on the basis of they want someone who's going to be a more sustainable league finisher.
Yeah.
And I think that the reality is that as JJ was alluding to there, it hasn't been sustainable enough for them to consistently finish higher up the table. Now, the argument that I think then you would give in return to that is, well, is there any guarantee that Thomas Frank, who is the leading candidate, or the other candidates who seem high up, Marco Silva and Donny Arilla, is there any guarantee that they would be more sustainably top finishing coaches than Postecoglou?
I don't know, but we're going to ask that question in a moment.
Yeah, but I suppose.
But you're going to answer.
I'm just going to say that even if they aren't, I think the way that the ownership will see this is we have to start making steps towards.
Sure.
Maybe this is just an interim coach towards the sort of coach that we want, right? So
we need to not finish 17th.
Yeah, I don't think the argument can necessarily be, well, if for example, Thomas Frank comes in and doesn't win a trophy in 2 years, he's been a failure. The question is going to be whether or not they see the club being on a trajectory towards, more sustainable league finishes. And I know I've caveated this with this is the defence of the way that the ownership will view this. That doesn't take into account any of the feelings of the fans, and I completely understand that the fans might feel a certain way. There's two very different ways of looking at it. Depending on which side of the coin you fall on, you're going to feel completely the opposite about it. So there's no right or wrong answer here. I don't think it's just very much the perspective that you're viewing it from.
Well, I enjoyed watching the Google Doc while you were talking there, John, because Steve was earnestly trying to work out how much money Spurs had won from winning the Europa League, and he started to put his working in there, and then when you were rounding up, he deleted it all and then wrote instead it's too hard to work. But we think it's not as much money. I get that point. Now, Kaya, what do you think? I mean, does it make sense, or should he have been let go?
I think I'm a bit more on the fence than you are, because if you look at the job he was brought in to do, he was brought in to make Spurs a bit more exciting after a few years of quite dull football under Conte and Mourinho. He achieved that. They're much more entertaining than they were in that period, and he was brought in to maybe, ideally, win a trophy. So in those senses, that was any Tottenham manager. Is that what they said? Any Tottenham manager, their job is to try and win a trophy in this era.
Could you not argue that any Tottenham manager in this era's job is to finish in the top four and all other stuff be damned?
I think it's different because the Tottenham fan base in particular are so sort of starved of trophy, or they had been so starved of trophies and the Spursy tag and all that kind of stuff. It was such a thing that was hanging over them and changing the culture of the club. Like we saw that last year when they were celebrating Man City beating them essentially to miss them out on the top four. Like, the culture of the club has not been one that wants to win trophies. Sorry, not one that wants to win trophies, one that has been able to win trophies. And to be fair to him, for all his faults, and I'll get onto them because there are many, Ange has been able to change that a bit, and they've become a club that is now capable of winning trophies and did play a much more attractive brand of football. And I think it felt like he was building something, which is where I think the Ten Hag comparison is interesting, because when Ten Hag got sacked, he'd been there 2 and a bit years and we still weren't quite sure what he was trying to do. But when Postecoglou had been there, within a couple of games, we knew exactly what he was trying to do. We knew there were massive flaws with it, but we knew what he was trying to do. That said, you can't finish 17th, especially in this Premier League, where the bottom three are so far adrift that it's essentially finishing bottom, in my opinion. I don't think you can do that, and you can't lose more than half your Premier League games. There does come a point where it's nice to have a nice style of football. It's nice to be sort of building towards something, but you do have to get results along the way. That is, the job of a football manager, particularly in the setup that Spurs have, where Ange's the head coach, he's not the manager. He doesn't have to deal with all the other stuff aside from that. His job is coaching the team on a day-to-day basis, and he made them a much better, exciting football team to watch. But yeah, they were too open, they were too defensively vulnerable, and they were more pragmatic towards the end. But the fact that he even switched a little bit his tactics and it still didn't really work to transform them in the league, I think it's the right decision, but I don't think it's as clear cut as some people are maybe making it out to be.
Isn't that the most annoying part? That's the thing that would annoy me the most if I was a Spurs fan. Is we win a trophy, but we win a trophy with the coach doing the opposite of what he is ideologically committed to over the last 2 years. The ideological commitment, by the way, that has led to us finishing 17th in the Premier League, and then he suddenly doesn't do it at the end of a tournament football with the very reasonable answer that tournament football is different to league football. Mate, I just found that I would find that really annoying if I was a Spurs fan. This is obviously a problem and obviously not working. And I totally take your point about the Ten Hag comparison. We didn't know what Ten Hag was trying to do come the end of his Manchester United tenure. And you're right that we knew what Postecoglou was trying to do from within 2 minutes of him arriving. I think from within 7 minutes of him being there, it was obvious that wasn't going to work. At least it was to me. And it seemed obvious to every other team in the Premier League because they knew exactly how he was going to play. He never changed how he was going to do that. And they were exploited for it time and time again. And I've no personal dog in the fight. I just find it bizarre that I understand from an emotional perspective. Spurs fans win the Premier League. They win the Europa League. They're delighted to win a trophy. I totally get that, and I understand also liking somebody and having enjoyed spending that time, whether virtual or not, around that person, that association with them. Is it not also possible, though, to like detach that from the decision about whether this person is the right person to continue taking a role? Because it seems so obvious that, I mean, he was always going to get fired, wasn't he?
Yeah, but then all managers are now.
Yeah,
and there's a bunch of things I want to try and remember to say that I was thinking of while you were saying that. Like, one of the things that's interesting about Postecoglou is that it's not like he has a style of play, but whatever. But what he wants is to have like entertaining attacking. He wants his team to attack and try and score and play from the front, not be defensive and let teams at you. He wants to be in control and going at you because that's what he wants to watch. He wants football, and it becomes almost. I mean this in like a negative slagging off way, but like a childlike thing. Like, why do you play football? Do you play it because you want to play it and enjoy it? Do you want to try and score goals and get the hero moments that you remember and the memories that you take home because it was fun?
There's a purity to it.
Yeah, and I really like that because then that means you can actually go. You're going to see your team play. They're going to try and win today. They're not going to try and draw 1-1 with West Brom or whatever, like some boring thing that you can deal with forever and you're stuck in mid-table forever. I like that idea going forward with it. Then they're in like high performance environments. There's lots of things that come into play, and like tactics matter. How good the players are matter. How well they gel together matters. Every manager's been at Spurs for the last 10, 15, 20 years. Said the same thing. And they said it's like there's a mentality at the club. It's not the one that we need to be able to win things. Everyone's come out and said the similar thing. I can't remember the exact quote, but they almost all do the exact same thing. So you have that in there. But then if you win trophies, that's one thing that's good for the fans or whatever, but these are all businesses now, and they're kind of looked at the same way you'd look at a stock portfolio or a company. And I guess if your company's winning Company of the Year, but you've only turned over 5 million in profit that year rather than the 12 that you wanted, it's not the right guy for you. You want someone who can level you out and get you towards something. But if you're trying to build this base, this core, this dressing room thing I keep going back to, it takes time. And you'd need to have that in there for a while. Otherwise, if you keep swapping out like a new celebrity manager, and they come in with their own style, then they want to make sure that they're not lost in the quagmire of it. Then they have to adapt to everyone. So what everyone wants really is Alex Ferguson to turn up, who will just adapt and then make you win games and scream at people and do that. It doesn't really work anymore.
But the only logical question that remains in this conversation is: does anyone here think Ange Postecoglou was building towards something that after another season or another one after that would have led to a consistent finishing in the top four, or people like us sitting around tables saying, oh, wow, that was a great idea to keep him? Because if you believe that, I will completely accept that there was any other option.
Yeah.
If you don't believe that, then this isn't complicated a decision, right?
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is if Spurs had lost the Europa League final, the entire weight of the argument about winning a trophy is gone, right? And that's not to say that
awful.
that's not to say that argument doesn't have any weight. I agree that it does, but like if you win it in the manner in which they did, and in the Europa League, I thought Spurs were largely quite bad, especially in the group stages. Like some of the games that they were coming through was not because they were playing well, it's because they had better players than the other team. Yeah. And then you get to the final and it's Manchester United, who also had a generationally bad season, who made it all the way through to that final as well.
And then didn't seem to try to win.
Yeah. It then comes down to this sort of one goal game, very messy game. And, you can praise Spurs for some of the things they did in that game, but it wasn't a good game of football.
It was awful.
Yeah. If that's the thing that is deciding whether or not you keep a manager or not, it does sort of start raising questions about like what kind of place trophies have started to gain within the discourse. Because there's a quote from a guy on Twitter under the handle Comrade You Spurs. He said, sometimes bad teams win trophies. Most of the time, good teams competing at the top of the table win all the trophies. Ask Swansea and Wigan and Birmingham how their trophy helped them win more trophies. If you want to win more trophies, being sustainably good is how you do it. Now, again, you can argue that sacking your manager and bringing in a different manager isn't necessarily going to be a golden ticket to becoming sustainably good.
Yeah.
But, it's the way that it's probably one of the ways that you can go about doing that potentially in the long run. And I think that for me, that's the reality of it. It's yes, you take the trophy, you enjoy the run of games that you had in that tournament. You have really nice memories of the final day, but it shouldn't necessarily then impact your decisions about whether or not the project is working or not.
In some ways, I also thought over the weekend it's kind of the perfect ending, because for Spurs fans forever now, they almost get to part with Ange Postecoglou. Is still in love with him in some ways, and forever. If they don't win another trophy for another 10, 20 years, like, Ange Postecoglou will go down in history as one of those great, like, cultishly, incredible
His
managers.
impact on all football will be exactly that.
Yeah.
So that's and it might live on in the club as well. I think it'd be perfect if he had left. If he'd gone see you later, and then just off. That would have been pretty cool. But that's exactly right.
It's the hardest thing for managers to do, though, right? Leave at the right time. Yeah. It's why Jurgen Klopp leaving Liverpool when he did was actually probably one of the biggest managerial decisions of a long time.
Sure.
Most managers, even Ferguson and Wenger, sort of overstayed their welcome. That's the wrong word, but you know what I mean.
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah,
even the last
they missed opportunities to go.
Yeah,
sorry. Even the last game of the season, I read that loads of Spurs fans were basically cheering and laughing when Brighton kept pumping goals in against them. They've lost 4-1 after the Europa League final, but fans didn't care, and that's probably he's probably nailing shut the coffin.
Sure,
because you don't really want that. The club's become a bit of a joke in a certain way.
Ideally, you wouldn't want that.
The fans didn't want to go to the Premier League games by the end, right? So for all of the talk of giving us memories and stuff, it's a very specific
Well, I do.
The memories of getting 4-1.
Those memories don't count, right? And
no, but the memories of he was a fun and funny guy, and they won a trophy. That's all that really matters, isn't it? At the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I think it's perfectly fine for fans to feel upset about this decision.
I think the only what if I feel with Spurs is what if they had got a little bit more depth in their squad, particularly defensively, because you talk about the obvious flaws.
Yeah, maybe they would have finished 13th or something.
Well, maybe even 12th. But I think you talk about consistently finishing top four. I don't think they ever would have won a league under Ange Postecoglou, for example, because I don't think he's got the pragmatism you need in those certain big games to consistently win and consistently perform at the top level. But I think he could have built them into a decent sort of top 5, top 6 challenging team every year with a little bit more depth, particularly at the back, where when Romero and Van de Ven weren't playing, they were a completely different team. When they were playing, it did look like the tactics were plausible, but you can't, I agree, in modern day when there's 60-odd games a season, you can't just rely on 2 players. But
that's true, Kai, right? I want to run towards my problems like Premier League attacks run towards a drag us in. You know what I'm saying?
I do want to push back a little bit on that, because I think there were definitely tactical problems, even when they... So I did quite a long analysis with Nathan Clark on the Extra Inch, just going through the Chelsea game from a few months ago, and in that Chelsea game, Spurs had their starting 11 effectively of players, and we went through and we broke down all of the particularly some of the defensive issues in that game as well. And I think they've been there the whole time. It's just that you can get away with it a bit more when you have better players, right? So for me, the depth thing is not necessarily being this is a plausible way of playing football if you have good enough players. It's that it's probably a slightly implausible way of playing football, but you can get away with it enough that it works.
It's the Pep Rodri thing at Man City, right? It's if you've got Rodri, you can play in this incredible way. If you don't have Rodri, you suddenly can't play that way at all.
I mean, I would probably disagree with that as well, because I think that...
Stop disagreeing with everyone. Become more agreeable.
This one, I think there's clear structural things you can point to and say this isn't going to work regardless, most of the time. Right. Sometimes maybe you'll get away with it if your centre-backs pull out worldly stuff.
Right.
And I think that the problem with that is that if you're relying on the abilities of your players to pull things off, then you're more likely for things to go wrong than if you have a system which is sort of buffered against those kind of things in the first place.
Let me ask you a question you won't like, though. Okay. It's a serious question. You might interpret it as a dig or a needle, but it isn't. It's something that listeners at home, Tottenham fans, will be listening to you talk and thinking this in their heads, right? If you can see that, and if Nathan Clark can see that, then why doesn't Ange Postecoglou change that? Presumably if the answer was as simple as he's expecting defenders to do worldy stuff in order for the system to work, why does he believe it would work? What's the thing that he sees that gives him the confidence to play that way?
Well, I guess all the tactical systems are sort of trade-offs, right, in both directions. So to an extent, some of this comes down to the fact that he wants to keep his attacking players maybe a little bit more in more dangerous positions, right? So the idea being we'll maybe fly 4 sheets to the wind defensively, but it will give us all of these upsides in an attacking. I don't know why I use that metaphor. It's funny what
4
comes
sheets
into
to the wind.
Yeah. Basically, they're sort of like riding on the seat of their pants a little bit defensively because it gives them upside going forward.
Yeah.
And, you know...
And we did see lots of games where they scored a lot of goals and conceded a lot of goals.
Yeah, and you know, I suppose even in that Chelsea game that I'm talking about, Spurs had a big chance-ish to equalise at the end. But I just think that, again, this comes down to, like, I think when you're in the Premier League... One, coaches are very good at like identifying your weaknesses and finding solutions to those weaknesses. And two, the players in the league are so good that they're going to find solutions themselves to those sorts of problems as well.
And that was happening every week against Spurs.
The needle just moves in the wrong direction. The trade-off becomes unmanageable.
Right.
And I think the big disappointment for me is that, because I was a massive fan of Ange Postecoglou when he arrived at Spurs, I thought it was going to be a good opportunity for him to showcase that he could do the stuff that he was doing at the highest level. I was probably a little bit disappointed that there wasn't more. And it's not necessarily even pragmatism. It's just more accepting where that needle is at any one time and saying, okay, when the needle's this high in the Scottish Premiership, it's gonna be whatever it's called these days. I will get it wrong. Scottish.
That's the one.
Is it called Scottish? Yeah, I've done it. Nailed it. You're going to get away with that a little bit more because of the talent discrepancy. When you're at Spurs and you're in the Premier League, when those talent discrepancies aren't there, you need your players to do more of the heavy lifting, right? Which is fine. You've got better players, but when those players don't perform,
sure,
then it doesn't come out in your.
It's like how when you and me are playing FIFA and we play against a team and we win 5-0 and then we go, the tactics work, lads.
Yeah, as to why he didn't change, I don't know. Like, and I mean he did by the end, but like the changing by the end, I think was arguably worse than what he was starting out with because they lost a lot of the benefits of what he's actually quite good at. And yeah, they became quite pragmatic, and it worked in the Europa League. It didn't work in the Premier League at all. So again, it's kind of these trade-offs. The needle just didn't ever really balance for him.
Do you think he backed himself into such a corner with the press conferences where he was saying, this is who we are, mate, all that kind of stuff? Do you think he sort of was so dogmatic in those first few months when he was coming under the criticism that he almost couldn't turn back on it, what it was before?
There's definitely a line that managers use, which is like, if I don't believe in my ideas, then how can I expect my players to do that? So the players need to have ownership of the idea. And again, that's a fairly like narrow tightrope that you're walking, because at some point, if you do change, it then looks as though you're backtracking, right? So if it felt like Marcelo Bielsa is someone who uses that kind of line quite a lot. Roberto De Zerbi also. And I think that's the problem, is that when you go in with that kind of attitude and then your tactics prove to be not efficient enough, then you're sort of backed against the wall a little bit. But he did change it, and then I guess he used the excuse of like, well, maybe it's not an excuse, but like this idea that cup competitions are different to league competitions. But yeah, it's tricky. It's hard, and I feel for the guy. I really do, because I really enjoyed watching his Celtic. I watched almost every game that his Celtic team played. I went up to Celtic Park to go and watch him in the flesh. So I am. There's this sense that I'm anti-Ange, but I'm not. I'm just.
You were a disciple.
Yeah, and I think that he hasn't performed at the level that is requisite for a manager to stay in the
And
Premier
now
League.
you're a Judas.
There's also the idea like that the way he plays is like an opposite to it. That's the only thing he could do. He could have changed certain parts of certain bits of how his team plays to adapt in different situations, but like the obvious opposite to what he was doing is to play similar to what I think they'll do under Thomas Frank, and they'll try and block out all the spaces, make sure there's no gaps, they're not so open so they don't lose 4-1 to Brighton, and eventually you'll end up grinding out 0-0s and 1-0s, and that gets you higher up the table, so that's efficient and is fine. But one of the things I think is relevant to Postecoglou is like what's the point then? Like, I don't want to watch that, I don't want to do that, I have a chance to do this now, so I should play the way I want to.
Is it like that TikTok trend where the caption is just, I almost forgot this was the point, and then it's something like nice that
If you win a game 4-1, it's quite fun. If you lose it, it's not. So then like the obvious thing to do is try and avoid doing that.
Do you remember Alex Ferguson's final Manchester United game, which was 5-5 against West Brom?
Yeah.
And Romelu Lukaku scored a hat-trick as well, I always thought this is one of the greatest games I've ever seen. But when you detach it from any broader sort of I don't know. I remember this is we're going off on a tangent here, Steve. I'll try and make it really snappy, okay? But I was talking to my wife yesterday about artificial intelligence, and we were talking about the sort of irony of the fact that whilst we all believed in the decades prior that automation and artificial intelligence was going to arrive and take on these sort of boring blue-collar jobs that nobody wanted to do, turns out this is really good at art instead, and it's all the things that we wanted to do in our spare time that it's better at. And, my wife said to me, she said, her argument about why this isn't necessarily a bad thing is she said, AI could never take away the act of me creating something, And I said, that's true. But I think when I'm being creative, that it's impossible to divorce that act of creation from my idea of what that might be or mean when I release it to the world, right? I know art isn't competitive, but I definitely competitively make art, right? the notion that it could be a good thing, or that people might like it, or it might be, this number of people might watch it in the case of a video we make, or, that stuff is part of what drives me to be creative. If that wasn't there, how creative am I? Do you know what I mean? Like, can you really separate these things? So, as it relates to this conversation,
well, that's like the creation of like actually making something physically appear. Whereas, like, the creation is the idea that you had that didn't exist in the world before, and now it does. But with AI, you can make that exist physically. So, like, if I want to draw something, so you're
saying the creation is the prompt.
Well, kind of, yeah. Maybe you can tell me. So, if I want to make a video with a certain kind of illustration, which I could draw because I can draw, but like not that well, and it would take me forever, and I could get there and it'd be all right, or I can get a robot to make it that bit for me, so I can quickly make the whole idea that I'm thinking of on the spot. I want to make it perfect for me because I can fire these things out, and then I've created something that didn't exist in the world, and now it's like physical and it's there.
Oh, sure, that's fine. I mean, I'm not saying that's not fine. People could argue about where the art takes place.
Ange Postecoglou into a robot.
No, I'm saying that when West Brom drew 5-5 with Manchester United on Sir Alex Ferguson's final day in charge as Manchester United manager, that it was funny, but ultimately because it didn't matter, I didn't care. Do you know what I mean?
So you're saying that, like, if you were to see a piece of art that was made by AI, it would be different to going to the National Gallery and looking at a painting because there's not been that process of like hard work to make it good?
No, I'm saying
I like that.
That could be true
because
for some people.
That's part of it, right?
That's part of it, but also like my favourite type of art is art that's like completely divorced from context. Anyway, I don't really. Most of the art I own in my home that I hang on my walls, I don't know who painted it. I've no clue. It might as well be a fucking robot.
But you appreciate the work that's gone into something like that, right?
But I guess it's the idea and the skill. So if you're looking at painting in a gallery, you're appreciating both the skill and what it does to you emotionally, which comes from the idea which that person had to have had.
Sure.
Unless they were commissioned.
Well, but I also believe quite strongly in the notion of the death of the author. I think when I look at art and I'm moved, it's because I'm good at looking at art. And if you don't feel the same thing when you look at it, it's because either you haven't had the same life experiences or because you're shit at looking at art.
Well, that's maybe actually true. Then you can apply it to Spurs quite well because like you like watching them because of what they do. And part of the skill then is like his idea is to do this, to play that way. But the skill is in how you coach that. But there can be detriment. So like say you're a painter and you've got this idea and you have the skill level, but then someone keeps coming and like hacking at your leg with an axe and you're like, off, go away. Why are you trying to cut my leg off?
Why are they doing that? Yeah.
Well, then that's happened. You go into a game against a really good team at the highest level of football and you don't have any centre-backs, no midfielders.
And they've got an axe as well.
And your left winger can't run anymore. And so like you're like sort of detrimented. So you're like trying to paint with a spoon. You're like, well, I can do it, but it's going to take a long time.
You're saying, let me sing this perfectly, but actually you have to stand in minus 40 degrees and do it.
Exactly, yeah.
And the vocal cords are a little strained.
And sometimes and then you come out of that and you're like a bit shaken from it, so you're a little bit loose. So when you go into a really good battle and you're trying, I don't know when you're in battle after singing, you're in a singing battle. But you've lost your confidence, and so you don't sing as well as you could do. And the other singers, they haven't had to go through the ice wall. They're just fine.
You freeze like Bunny Rabbit in 8 Mile. These things happen. Listen, let's play the separation game, and when we come back, we'll talk about Thomas Frank and which. You
put yourself in this mess. You get.
Oh, let's play the separation game. Brian and Burmo look set. This is what Steve said. Brian and Burmo, he wrote this down. He's not saying it. I'm reading. I just want to be clear. I'm reading what Steve has written. I haven't read it yet.
We've had enough meta in this episode already.
There's already been enough?
Yes.
Okay. Brian and Burmo.
That's what Steve writes.
Thanks, John. Looks set to become the latest of distinguished forwards to have worn the Manchester United shirt.
That's a really weird grammatical.
He's
Well,
about to have worn it in the past. He's about to have worn it in the
blown
past.
my brain completely.
Steve says it's not what he wrote. But
Set to become the latest in the list of distinguished forwards to have worn the Manchester United shirt.
oh, it does say in the list. Yeah, I must have missed that bit when I was reading.
That still means he's wearing it in the past, but in the future.
in the future. The problem is, viewers, is because I can only see with one eye because the other eye is being blocked by the microphone. I have to put my laptop
Got
on very
no
specific
depth.
plays. I've got no depth perception. Listen, watch. Amongst them is South African Quentin Fortune, who joined United for £1.5 million from Atletico Madrid in August 1999. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this week's separation game is Brian Mbeumo all the way to Quentin Fortune, please. Very exciting. Now, listen, while you work this out, I'm going to go and get myself a drink. Can I get anybody anything?
No, thank you.
All good, thank you.
All right, we're back from a break. Let's play the separation game. Now, I hear it took quite a while, but I hear some of us have made it. Kaya, have you got one?
Yes.
How many do you claim?
3 players in between Fortune and Burmo.
Yeah, well, as we know, that is what is counted. You know, however
Cool.
silly that is. That is the no. Okay, so you think 3. What about you, John?
3 also.
What about you, JJ?
In the middle of about 7 at the moment, but I'm almost there.
You're still going?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. All right, fine. Well, I can tell you that Steve claims to have done this in 2.
I think it's definitely doable in 2.
I mean,
don't
having
have
read his route, it is. But let's start with you, Kaya. You say 3. Tell me about your route.
Okay, so Brian Burmo played with Neil Mopai at Brentford, who played with Ashley Young at Everton, who played with Ryan Giggs at Manchester United, who played with Quentin Fortune.
That's nice.
Thank you.
There was no overlap between Fortune and Young, then, I guess, was there?
No, Young came a bit later.
Yeah. Okay, nice. What about you, John?
I went the other way around. So
Right.
I started with Quentin Fortune, who played with Billy Sharp at Doncaster Rovers.
Who played at Sheffield United, right?
Yes, but he also played at Leeds
Oh,
for a season where he played with Liam Cooper.
okay.
Liam Cooper played with Pontus Jansson at Leeds, and Pontus Jansson played with Brian Mbeumo at Brentford.
Another 3. Okay, JJ, would you care to take us through your megalodon before I give you the answer?
Yeah, so I think maybe we can just. I think this works. I
Yeah?
think I've just done it.
Okay.
Oh my God, this works. Right, so Quentin Fortune played. Where the hell did he play?
Played at Man United.
Oh yes,
This seems
is
like
that where I
quite an
started
important
off?
part of this step.
I think I started at Man United, and he played at Man United with Liam Miller,
Right. That's one.
who was at Celtic,
Uh-huh.
and then at the same time at Celtic was Stephen McManus, who was at Celtic. At the same time at Celtic was Dylan McGeoch, who went to Aberdeen.
Right.
At the same time, I think Ross McCrory was there.
Right.
He used to play for Rangers. At the same time that Alan McGregor was there. Alan McGregor at the same time as Stephen Naismith,
Right.
who later went to Hearts,
Uh-huh.
where he played with Aaron Hickey, who played with Brian Mbeumo.
Okay, so that's 7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah.
Pretty good.
If it's, I might not check out, but I think it does.
Well done. Okay, I'm not going to check it. I believe you. The Scottish route. There's always power in the Scottish route. Okay, here's Steve's working. Quite impressive, I'd say. Brian Mbeumo played alongside Ben Mee at Brentford last season, who played with Phil Bardsley
Wow.
at Burnley in the 17-18 season, and onwards. And Bardsley, of course, made 2 appearances in cups for Manchester United in the 02-03 season,
Nicely done.
where he played with Quentin Fortune.
Oh, I should do that one instead. That's better.
Good friends
Phil
with
Bardsley.
Good friends with Wayne Rooney, right? Phil Bardsley.
Are they indeed?
Would you not
Knocked him
remember?
out.
Yeah, do
Yeah.
you not remember the famous getting knocked out in the kitchen celebration,
No.
where Phil Bardsley and Wayne Rooney were boxing in the kitchen, I guess play sparring, and Phil Bardsley knocked Wayne Rooney out, and then he did that celebration, right, where he ran up and then just fell backwards.
Right, I remember the celebration. I don't remember that
Yeah.
it was based on...
Phil Bardsley.
Cool. How about that? All right, well done, Steve. You are the winner of the game. Although you did prepare it at home and probably
It took me
spent-
way longer than the.
Took
Yeah,
you
yeah,
way
yeah,
longer
yeah,
than
yeah,
these
yeah.
guys. It's still impressive, though. It's still... Okay, well done, everyone involved. Now, back to Spurs, okay? We're going to have a quick chat now about Thomas Frank, because David Ornstein has described Thomas Frank, Brentford manager, as the, quote, leading contender to replace Postecoglou at Tottenham. He is also seen as such by the bookmakers by some distance at this point. So I don't know whether it's going to happen or not, but at least the bookmakers believe that it is the most likely by miles. I think the second closest is Marco Silva, and then there's a little wee shout in there for Oliver Glasner. JJ, this would be it'd be Thomas Frank's first probably big opportunity at a quote big club. Do you think it would work? You were starting to tell us beforehand what you thought a Spurs Frank team might look like.
Yes, I don't think it's very exciting. So this is the thing with Frank. So he's done very, very well with Brentford, but it's been in line exactly with all the, let's call it Moneyball stuff, right? So they look for value, they find underappreciated players. They've used that to grow the club really impressively, and now deservedly so. They are a mid-table Premier League team established. And Frank's... the way he plays with players, the way he manages them as people seems to be exactly what kind of works there. At Spurs, I think he'll make them much harder to beat, which is the obvious thing to do. Go back to basics, they'll always do. And he'll probably grind out games. It won't be as fun to watch, but he has overperformed to an enormous extent in the Premier League. I think they have the lowest wage. I can't find that spreadsheet we've got, John, with all the wages versus points and stuff like that. But he's basically overperformed to a ridiculous amount with the lowest wage budget or just transfer budget of anyone in that league for the last few years. So I think just based on his past performance at making a team who isn't very good much better and getting the most out of players or assets, as they probably be referred to at that club, and then you can sell them on for more money, I think he is by far and away the best possible candidate they could get to turn themselves into like a long-term project team that could achieve things in the future.
What do you think, John?
I think that people are really bad at distinguishing between what a good mid-table manager can do and what a good elite manager needs to be able to do.
Right. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, as JJ said, Thomas Frank's job at Brentford is to work in a system where the whole system is built to maximise efficiency, right? So you've got teams of analysts who are helping them find margins. They've got teams in the recruitment who are able to find value. You've got the manager who is able to take the squad that is presented to him and get them performing, as JJ said, well above where you might expect them to be given their wage budget. And
presumably by being a good communicator and being able to communicate all of the things coming from those other places, right?
But also being able to be super flexible and adaptable, as we've talked about. So his teams, it's hard to know what Spurs will look like, right? Because his team, he's often run numbers of different approaches. They've used almost every formation at some point or another. Not that really indicates anything, but they're happy moving between different structures. And I think also the ability to function within a system where often I think managers expect a lot of control. He probably doesn't have as much control necessarily as maybe a manager at a top club might have, and as a result, it makes it a lot easier for everything to function in a smooth way, right? That you have this sort of central idea, and everything sort of flows out of that idea. Going to a club like Spurs, suddenly, I mean, lots of things change, right? One of them is that he will suddenly have a lot more money available to him. He'll have better players available to him, and he'll have the expectation to do something very different to what the expectation was at Brentford, right? Where the expectation at Brentford was always survive relegation, still is, despite the fact they've had a good season. Going to Spurs, that expectation is very different, right? The expectation is that you should be challenging for European spots, which I guess has become easier in recent years because there's more European spots available. But that's the reality, right? It's not about making sure that you're going to survive the league. It's about making sure that you can succeed in the league. And we just don't really have a huge amount of evidence of what that's going to look like, which makes it tricky. So that's not to say that he won't be able to do that. And I guess having the ability to be adaptable is going to be important for him to be able to develop that different management style at a different club in a different context. But equally, it's a little bit of a gamble. You're expecting a manager to sort of evolve sort of styles and contexts on the job, and so I'm really interested to see how it sort of plays out. But I think that he'll probably be a floor raiser. I think he'll probably make Spurs much more functional in the short term. The big question is about what impact that has on the ceiling, and because a lot of the things I think that the Brentford do well are things that Spurs I don't think will be able to get away with maybe quite so much as Brentford do, which is like playing direct attacks off the back of maybe a little bit more deep-lying defending in some games. They do have the ability to like press high, and you know that flexibility is there. But I think it's much easier for you to construct those sorts of attacks when teams are going to be willing to leave themselves open to you, which I don't think will be happening as much for Spurs as it might do for Brentford. So these are the sorts of questions that I'm sort of interested to see how he overcomes them. But he will bring that attitude of like fine margins. I think, you know, things like set pieces that can be improved upon, and he'll take a lot of intellectual property from Brentford and give it, you know, to Spurs, and that can only be a good thing as well. So yeah, I think it's I would see this as a stepping stone higher to, and you sort of go, okay, maybe he won't be a ceiling raiser. Hopefully he will, but if he isn't, then it's a good place for us to then build to bring in the next manager as well. So yeah.
Okay. What about you, Kai?
I think he's going to face two big tests that he's never really faced before in his managerial career. One of them is the intense speculation that does come with managing a bigger club, and Brentford, because of a lot of the good stuff they do, the coverage around Brentford is quite positive, and you know, fair enough. Whereas Spurs, as we spent the first half of the podcast discussing, have at times been a bit of a crisis club, and you know that is constantly going to be on him all the time. And he comes across well in press conferences and seems like a nice sort of guy, but when he's under that pressure and that scrutiny and sort of facing those kind of more intense questioning every single week, it'll be interesting to see how he handles that. More of a test, I think, though, is European football and managing a squad through that. He's had quite a small squad at Brentford, and he's been able to get the maximum out of players and really push them to their limits, like John was saying, but that's without having to play a team every 3 days, and that's with having a lot of time on the training ground to work with players. With Spurs, with them being in the Champions League next season, he's not going to have that much time, and because he's coming into a team that lost 22 games last season, he needs to win quickly. And it's interesting, at both Bromby and Brentford, he had quite a poor start. I don't know if he can afford that, because if he starts badly, I think there will be a bit of pressure on him, and then once the pressure comes, how will he handle that, and how will he deal with the lack of time on the training ground, the lack of time to improve players individually? That's the big thing for me. So I think if I was him, I'd be trying to get appointed as Tottenham manager as soon as possible, so that he can start straight away and start working with those players straight away. Because the longer it runs on and the less time he has in pre-season, the more of an issue I think it could be for him, because like we were saying, his methods are so focused on getting the maximum out of players and individuals, but you need time on the training ground to do that, which he's not going to have as much time at Spurs. So yeah.
Fair enough. Well, I mean, it seems obvious that there will be some big challenges facing Thomas Frank if he does get appointed as the Spurs manager. One of them is that if you win a trophy, you get sacked. F***ing weird, isn't it? That's a weird how it works.
Watch out for you with the trophy that you've won now.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm going to lose my job, but points are bad. Anyway, JJ Bull, thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
John McKenzie, thank you.
Cheers.
Kaya Kayanak, thank you.
Tar very much.
Yeah, all right, that's 3 different types. And Steve Hankey was also here.
No.
Yeah?